Welcome back, and I'd like to thank all of you who've subscribed to the channel. We now are up to nearly 2,000 subscribers, which is just simply magnificent. We are also going to start on a new field today. Last week we completed more or less near-death experiences, but we're now going to start on death itself. Now, the very mention of that word death will conjure up in many of you existential anxiety, but I'm not going to deal with this till right at the end, because once I've shown you that there's nothing to fear in death, then we can talk about the diminishing or the abolition of existential anxiety. Okay, so it's going to be death. Now, your course book, you'll remember, is this one. And you'll notice at the bottom that it is in fact myself and my wife that wrote it. So I thought I would like to introduce you to my wife. So, Elizabeth, come here and come and meet everyone. This is my lovely wife, and we've been together for how many years?
56, I think it is.
56, yeah, it's a lot of
I'm not
years.
sure what the 60-year anniversary is.
And we both have very different talents. So we make a very good team. Why do you think we make a good team?
Because you can't spell.
That's true.
And it was very good for me too, because I'd written about birth and childhood and adolescence, but I'd never got as far as death and dying. And it was very, very valuable for me to learn about these experiences, which if I'd been told about them, I probably wouldn't have. I'd have thought they were imagination. But when you hear people's stories and people you know tell them, it broadens your mind, and that's what it's done to me. It's made me much more open and enthusiastic about writing about them.
And do you think that your knowledge of death has in fact made life, if you like,
It's certainly, I'm certainly not frightened of dying anymore. I don't know whether I ever was, really, but I know I'm not now. In a funny sort of way, I'm kind of, well, perhaps not looking forward to it, because there's too much I enjoy going on here. But I'm curious about what it will be like, and I'm not frightened. So there you are. You'll
well,
feel the
she's
same.
mentioned a most important word, and please never forget it. Be curious. Curious is the word, and I'll explain all that later. So thank you very much for coming in.
I'll leave you to it.
Okay. I think I can see Casper.
Oh, Casper, there you
Wondering
are.
if he's going to come back in. You're going to come back, Casper, or not? Well, let's start on death and dying. Now, the most interesting thing to me was just the way things plan out. I'd always been interested in near-death experiences, but did the near-death experience have anything to do with dying? Okay, you can argue that the people never actually died. I think we have Casper coming onto the computer. No, he's not. Nobody actually died. So can we use those as a model for death? Now, I think after all the work we've done that we can. So how did we start this? Well, you can't ask people questions in the health service unless you get ethical approval. So we went to the ethics committee in Southampton and said, I would like to do a study on dying people and ask them questions about their experiences. They were extremely good. They thought about it and discussed it and finally said, we think that the state of the art in hospice care really won't allow you to talk to the dying in this way. May we suggest that you do a carer study? that is, in fact, ask your questions not of the dying but of the carers. And that was just brilliant, because by talking to the carers, we could get a lot of information about what goes on in the hospice, what the difference between the medical people are in the hospice and the actual nurses, and then the volunteers. So it was a very good decision, that, and I thank the committee for making that decision. Now, I've been very lucky, because at the time that we were starting this, which is way back in 2002, so it's a long time ago. I see Casper has decided to come and join us. So at that time, I advertised and asked around for people who'd come and help with the project. Got some money for the project from the BL Foundation in Portugal, and I'd like to thank the BL Foundation very much. Now, the people who came was Sue Brain, who I think many of you will have seen, because she came. Come on, Casper, come sit on my knee. And that's a good point. And then Hilary Lovelace, she was a hospice nurse, and so her expertise was enormously helpful. She's now left the UK and gone to New Zealand. And in Ireland, we had Dr. Una McColville, and we also had Inika Kodam from Holland. So it was designed to be an English survey, Irish survey, and a Dutch survey, and that's exactly what it turned out to be. Now, when we had set it up, we then had to find hospices. Now, I'd like to thank the hospices very much for taking part. There were a number of them. 2 in the south of England, 1 in Scotland, and then of course there were the 2 hospices in Holland. So we started asking questions of the carers, and as soon as people knew that we were doing this, they came to tell us lots of things about what happened to the dying. But not only that, some of you may have seen the Richard and Judy television broadcasts which we did, and that was important, because again we got lots and lots of stories about the dying from that. And I also wrote some articles in the newspaper, and we got more stories. And in fact, although Casper the cat is here, there is a story about a cat which was confirmed from the hospices that we were talking to or that heard the Richard and Judy broadcast, because in the New England Journal of Medicine there was a story about Oscar the cat. And Oscar would curl up on the beds of the next people who were going to die in the hospice. And there was a lot of people saying, oh yes, they could tell because people who are going to die smell different, or he carried with him something which hastened people's departure. I don't think it's anything like that. He just actually knew. And when, after that broadcast, we got 2 hospices in the UK who said that they in fact had cats that behaved exactly alike. So it looks as if cats in fact know when we're going to die. So then, what did all this data mean? It meant that we could look at the dying process and start to understand how it happened. Well, first of all, the premonitions. Premonitions means that something tells you that you're going to die soon. It could be a dream, it could be seeing a deathbed visitor, it could be just a feeling. They're all there. And the important thing is they're usually quite soon before death. I remember one of the premonitions that I was told of. It was a mother who told me that her daughter, who had been married, they got small children, her husband, daughter's husband, had in fact said to his wife, "Listen, everything I have come here to achieve, I've done." What does that mean? I don't know, but that's what he said. And he said, "It's my time to go." So he did all the things that you should do. He made his will, decided where he wanted to be buried, and in essence he was just sort of waiting to die. And then there's no real indication he's in very good health, because his GP had a look at him and said no chance. So it wasn't clear at all. But she told me that his firm sent him to Africa, and he was in a small plane. It wasn't all that small, but it wasn't a commercial plane, and the plane crashed and he was killed. So he had that foreknowledge of what was going to happen. Now I've got other premonitions which we'll discuss next time. So the next thing that happens, you've either got a premonition or you've been told that you're going to die by your doctor, and the death process starts. We're going to discuss what your attitude should be and how you cope with that. And then about 2 to 3 weeks, or to 1 to 2 weeks before you actually die, deathbed visitors may come. Fascinating. What are these deathbed visitors? Are they just hallucinations in the mind of the people who are dying, or do they have some substance in their own? Well, we'll talk about that when we come to deathbed visitors. Then you come to the closer to death, and there really is most interesting things that happen. You go into another reality. You're in the hospice, and then you're in the other reality, and you're back in the hospice again, and then you're in the other reality. Now, what's this reality like? Well, some people describe it as a waiting room with spiritual beings there. Some people describe it rather like the English country garden we had in the near-death experiences, or certainly a benign place where you may find your dead relatives and spiritual beings. But the point about it is that the people there say, "Don't worry, because we're going to be here, we're going to look after you," and that's enormously important. Then as you come closer to death, just before death, there is something called terminal lucidity. This the Victorians called lightening up before death. Now, lightening up before death means that the dying suddenly will come out of a coma, will sit up despite the fact they've been paralyzed with a stroke for some time, or even that they've had Alzheimer's disease for 3 years, have recognized no one. They'll sit up, recognize their family, wish them goodbye, and then lie back again. Fortunately, since we started talking about this, more people have become interested in it, and so there are a number of papers published in the literature on it, and they're most amazing, but I'll talk about those later. And so that then is terminal lucidity, and then we come to the dying process itself. Now there is fortunately, a lot of new information on this which isn't really known to everyone. And this is the transitions. Now, what does that mean? Well, the word comes from a palliative care theologian in Switzerland, Monica Renz. She has written a number of papers on the transitions, and they are very exciting in a way. And just to give you a feel for it, as you're coming up to death, certainly in the last week, you have to have given everything up. Given up everything. Yes, when I say everything, I mean everything. Remember, a shroud has no pockets. So there's nothing that you can carry into the death process. So you have to give up your attachment to your children, your attachment to your goods and what you have in this world, because you have to leave everything behind. Now, assuming you can do that, you move from pre-transition to transition. And this is a state, a mental state, in which you are relieved of suffering to some extent. It's a sort of intermediate phase, which we'll talk more about when we get there. And then you go into post-transition. Now, post-transition, and the data on this is good, is when you go into something called non-duality. And so I'll have to talk to you about non-duality because it's very important. In fact, you become cosmic, in essence. And so that is the state that your body finally stops functioning and you appear to be released. So death then is not a switching off of consciousness, it's an expansion of consciousness into the next phase. Now, when you die, there are amazing things which happen at the time of death. Remember, this is a huge local change in consciousness, huge. Here was consciousness, if you like, before manifesting in your body, and then your body dies, and so consciousness has to move on, or so the data would seem to indicate. And this means that there are a set of phenomena. The first one is driven by the dying person himself. You get the opportunity to go and talk to somebody. These are called deathbed coincidences. We've done a study of those, and they occur exactly at the time of death. They're always driven by the loved one, and they usually end up with the person coming to the person they wanted to give a message to in their either, if the person is asleep, they'll appear in a narrative dream. A narrative dream is a dream which tells a story. Or if they're not asleep, then the person who they want to give the message to will feel an intense feeling that this person is dying, or this person wants to contact them or something. And if they can, usually the feeling will be that it's okay, it's all right now. And the message in the narrative dream is always it's all right. So those are interesting. We'll have a look at some of the examples of those. And then, what happens surrounding the dying? Remember, I said it's a massive change in consciousness. So, you get clocks which stop. Well, most of you will know that. My grandfather's clock is the story, and I'll tell you the story of that. Clocks stop. Do they still stop? Yes. We've got accounts of electronic clocks flashing the time of death. And then you get light in the room. We'll talk about light. It's quite fascinating. And you get animals that howl. Little Casper would, since he's really quite bonded to us, and if you like, we're bonded to him. So when one of us two dies, Casper will probably, if he's alive, will meow at the time of death. Dogs certainly howl, and birds, very interesting. More birds are seen on the windowsills of hospices, although I've got no data to prove that. I'd love somebody just to put a video camera onto the window of somebody who's dying and see how many birds alight on the window. And that would be a nice little project. But it's reported that birds are seen more often. But birds have a very strange behaviour. They will come into the room of the dying. They will be seen sitting around in the trees, an owl at the time of death, that sort of thing. And then they go. And then, of course, at the actual time of the dying process, smoke, well, it's not smoke, it's a sort of vapour, is seen coming up from the body, a shape seen leaving the body, and in the light, the body sometimes transfigures, and it looks absolutely wonderful, amazing, with this new light which is now emanating from it. And then all these phenomena slowly shut down, and that then is the end of the dying process. So you can see that we're going to have lots to talk about in the next few weeks, and we'll do one or two of these per viewing. But please do remember this. I've said nothing there which will scare you, which will make you feel scary. So don't be frightened about it, because there's nothing to be scared of. And we'll look at what Monica Renz finds, what the things that you can do before you die to not suffer, not be scared of dying. And one of them, and that's where we got our word from, is just to be curious. So I hope that you are as excited as I am about being able to discuss all these fascinating things that happen, not to everyone, but to many people who die. And the more we've gone into it, the more we've found that if you die consciously, then about 90% of people will have some of these phenomena, maybe not all, but some of them. So, thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to starting on this process next week. Thanks very much.